I'm Counts behind the camera. We're at the Fog's home, and this is Wednesday's devotion, and we're back to Luke again. Luke chapter 10, verse 38 through 42. This is the story of Mary and Martha, and I'm going to take you a different way, okay? So much truth in this passage. Let's read the scripture. Now it happened as they went that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. So it's Martha's home. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore tell her to help me." And Jesus answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her." I just noticed while I was reading this, not in my notes or anything like that. In fact, I just noticed it. Actually, that's a bad way to talk to God or Jesus. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, she loves Jesus, and she's fixing a meal for Jesus. She invited Jesus in her home. She knows who Jesus is, but this is a bad way to talk to Jesus. She's not the only one that does this. The disciples talk to Jesus the same way at times. And so I want to tell you that if you ever find yourself saying to God, "Don't you care about me? Don't you care about us? We're dying down here." Or, "Don't you care?" Don't be surprised to get a rebuke. Because when the disciples did it to Jesus in the midst of the storm, Jesus took care of them. And now here Martha doing the same thing, different situation. There's no storm. It's a good day. But Jesus still does the same. So I just want to let you know, that wasn't in my notes. That's just extra for today. But that's probably not the way to start your conversation with Jesus or with God. Don't you care? My goodness, the man, he came and died on the cross for you. So why in the world would you think that he didn't care? Anyway, let's move on. I want to share a story, and I told you from the very beginning, I didn't want to approach this scripture the way it normally would be, or the way I normally would. Many, many years ago, when we were in North Carolina, my wife's mother and grandmother came to visit us. So we made plans to take them to the beach. Well, a hurricane had come, but we still went. Now, it was right after the hurricane. I mean, literally, we're driving onto the beach right after the hurricane has passed, and her grandmother had never seen the beach, and I don't even know whether her mother had at that time, but we took them out on the beach. My kids were very little, but let me tell you something. I mean, there's a lot of fun times to have on the beach, but it was cold and it was raining. The backside of that hurricane was still upon us. But let me tell you something. That beach was covered. Now, it was not the kind of beach you would want to go sunbathing on or swimming on. It would have been any other day, but not on this day. This beach was covered with everything that had washed ashore. And there were shells and everything. It was a paradise. Trisha's grandmother and mother just went crazy. And my kids did too. We filled up. I mean, there was tons of perfect shells and coral, everything that you would normally walk down the beach but there was nobody on the beach. It was just us, and nobody else had gotten to it. There was probably a lot of things that I could have done that day. Probably tons of things I could have done that day. But on that day, I enjoyed just being with Grandma, my mother-in-law, my wife, and my two kids. I didn't do that enough as time went on. As a result, I don't have as many memories as I should. Let me tell you what I want you to hear from this. Now, there's tons, and I know that this message, this scripture has other meanings. Don't settle for anything less than the best. Sometimes the best is sitting around us, with us. And we get so busy doing what we think is on our agenda and what we think is the best that we miss the very best. Jesus is in the house. Jesus is teaching. Jesus is not worried about eating. Now, I'm sure his disciples were, but Jesus wasn't concerned about that. Mary chose the best. Oh, there'll be time to fix dinner later. But right now, Jesus is in the house. Some of the lessons that you learn as you get old, you realize you really wish you had learned them much younger. The problem is the lessons you learn when you are old, a lot of times it's too late to get them back. My kids aren't small anymore. Grandma's not here anymore. My mother-in-law can't walk the beaches anymore. Yeah. I don't know what you have on your agenda today, whether this is at the end of your day or at the beginning of your day. Don't miss the real best because you did what was best for you. Love you, Stuart Shelby.